In 1906, the English critic John Ruskin stood in the Cathedral of Lucca in northern Italy and wrote that he had found the most beautiful sculpture in the world. Not one of the most beautiful, the most beautiful. A superlative without qualification. From a man who had spent his life looking at art and was not given to casual overstatement. Almost no one agreed with him, then or since. The sculpture he was describing is the tomb of Ilaria del Carretto, a young noble woman who died in 1405 at the age of approximately 26. It is carved from white Carrara marble by Jacopo della Quercia, one of the most significant sculptors of the early 15th century. And it sits in a side aisle of the Lucca Cathedral, visited by far fewer people than its reputation suggests it deserves. Described in guidebooks in language that does not prepare you for what you find. The question of why Ruskin's response has not been shared more widely, why a work he called the greatest in the world remains relatively unknown outside specialist circles, is the question that leads, eventually, to what the tomb is actually doing. Ilaria del Carretto was the second wife of Paolo Guinigi, the Lord of Lucca. She died in childbirth, or shortly after, in December 1405. She was young, she was significant, and her husband's grief appears to have been genuine. The commission he placed with Jacopo della Quercia was substantial, the most ambitious funerary monument in the region, and he completed it within 2 years of her death. Jacopo della Quercia was at that point a sculptor of considerable promise, but not yet established reputation. He had competed, unsuccessfully, for the commission to make the Florence baptistery doors, the competition that went to Ghiberti and that Brunelleschi also entered, one of the most storied competitions in the history of Renaissance art. The Ilaria commission was, for della Quercia, an opportunity to demonstrate what he could do on a major scale. What he produced sits in a direct line of descent from the medieval tomb effigy tradition, the reclining figure on a flat slab, the hands folded, the body at rest. But it departs from that tradition in ways that have been generating commentary for 6 centuries. But this is where the story becomes stranger. That look at the figure directly. Ilaria lies on a cushioned bier, her head resting on 2 pillows, her hands folded across her body. She wears a formal gown with elaborate folds that pool around her feet. At her feet, a small dog lies curled, the conventional symbol of fidelity, present on countless medieval tomb effigies across Europe. And her face carries no expression of grief, no indication of suffering, no theological statement about death and resurrection. It carries nothing except a quality of rest so complete that the word peace does not quite reach it. This is the technical achievement at the center of the tomb, and it is more difficult than it sounds. Medieval funerary sculpture had developed across several centuries, a set of conventions for depicting the dead that balanced realism with theological meaning, the body shown in death, but positioned to suggest the resurrection that faith promised. The face in this tradition typically carries some residue of that promise, a slight upward tilt, a softening of the features that reads as the beginning of something rather than the end. Ilaria's face carries none of this. It is not tilted upward. It is not softened toward any suggestion of what comes next. It is simply at rest in a way that suggests the rest is complete and requires no continuation. Della Quercia carved not the promise of resurrection, but the fact of death, and made that fact, somehow, into something that Ruskin could only describe as the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, the standard art historical. Reading of the Ilaria tomb places it at the transition between the Gothic and Renaissance periods, a work that retains the flat, horizontal format of the medieval effigy while introducing the naturalistic attention to surface and texture that would define the Florentine Renaissance. The dog at the feet is Gothic. The treatment of the drapery is proto-Renaissance. Della Corte is positioned as a transitional figure, important to the history of style, but not fully belonging to either tradition. This reading is accurate. It is also, in some ways, beside the point, because the question Ruskin's response raises is not a question about stylistic transition. It is a question about what the tomb does to the person standing in front of it, and why that effect is so difficult to account for with the usual tools of art historical analysis at first. This seems to be a matter of personal taste. ISN single quotes T. The dog at Ilaria's feet has attracted more scholarly attention than any other element of the tomb, and the attention has produced a disagreement that has not been resolved. The conventional reading is straightforward. The dog is a symbol of marital fidelity, a standard element of the medieval funerary iconography, present on the tombs of noblewomen across Europe without particular significance beyond its symbolic function. But several scholars have noted that this specific dog, its posture, the way it is carved, the degree of attention Della Corte gave to its individual presence, exceeds what the symbolic function requires. It is not a generic dog. It is a specific dog, carved with the same attention to individual presence that Della Corte gave to Ilaria's face and hands. It is curled in the position of a sleeping animal, not the position of a heraldic symbol. If the dog is not simply a symbol, but a portrait, a representation of an actual animal that was part of Ilaria's life and is now, in some sense, keeping her company, then the tomb is doing something different from what the standard reading accounts for. It is not simply placing Ilaria within a conventional iconographic program. It is placing her within a specific life with specific attachments that the marble preserves alongside her. Whether this reading is correct, Della Corte left no account to confirm or deny. Ruskin's description of the Ilaria tomb as the most beautiful sculpture in the world was not universally dismissed. It was, more precisely, not widely shared, which is a different thing. The people who have made the journey to Lucca specifically to see it, who have stood in that side aisle with Ruskin's words in mind, tend to respond in one of two ways. Some find what Ruskin found, something that exceeds the sum of its formal qualities, that produces in the viewer a response that art criticism does not have the right vocabulary for. Others stand in front of a beautifully made medieval tomb effigy and wonder what Ruskin was talking about. The disagreement is not about the quality of the work. Everyone who has seriously engaged with the Ilaria tomb acknowledges its technical accomplishment, its historical significance, its place in the development of Italian Renaissance sculpture. The disagreement is about whether something else is present, something that Ruskin could only gesture toward with the word beautiful, and that others, looking at the same object, simply do not find. This is the question the tomb places in front of you, and it is not the kind of question that more information resolves. The archive does not contain an answer. The formal analysis does not contain an answer. What the tomb contains is a young woman asleep in marble, a small dog at her feet, and 6 centuries of people standing in front of her, trying to determine what they are actually looking at. Jacopo Della Corte went on to produce some of the most significant sculpture of the early 15th century, the Font Gaia in Siena, the portal sculptures at San Petronio in Bologna, works that influenced Michelangelo directly and that cemented his place in the history of Renaissance art. The Ilaria tomb is not typically cited as his greatest achievement. It is earlier, smaller, less overtly ambitious than the works that followed. And yet it is the work that produced Ruskin's superlative, the claim that among everything Della Corte made, and among everything that has been made in the Western tradition, this is the most beautiful. Ilaria has been lying in that cathedral since 1408. The dog has been at her feet for the same amount of time. The expression on her face has not changed, and the question, Ruskin placed in front of every person who has walked into that side aisle since. 1906. Whether what you are looking at is the most beautiful sculpture in the world, or simply a beautiful one, is a question that depends entirely on what happens when you stand there, which means the answer is different for every person who has ever asked it, and no one, including Ruskin, has been able to explain why.